What if I told you that you can start and grow a freeze drying business into whatever size you want to without the need of a freeze dryer? Well, you've clicked on the right video because I'm going to share with you an interview that I had with a company called Boreas Freeze Drying. They're a commercial freeze drying company that does different services, including toll freeze drying. If you're not familiar with toll freeze drying, it's basically taking your exact recipe of a freeze-dried product, whether it's candy, fruit, meals, vegetables, whatever you want, and they freeze dry it for you at scale. This particular avenue allows you to scale your freeze-drying business so that you can accept those huge orders from distributors and people that want your product, and it can significantly reduce the stress that you might have trying to figure out how you're going to raise that capital investment to get those large commercial freeze-drying units. Now, you can still get those, but it allows you to scale first and then look at financing one to bring in-house yourself. I'm really excited to introduce the team of Boreas with you, but before I do, if you're not familiar with this channel, it's all about freeze drying and freeze drying as a business. If you're not a subscriber now, click below and subscribe. You'll be notified of more videos coming out. Now let's get to the interview, and I'll introduce you to Heath and Blaine at Boreas Freeze Drying. We're here today with the president and the vice president of sales and marketing of Boreas today, Blaine and Heath. And thanks for joining this channel and talking about your company. Kind of give us a background on who you guys are, what you do, and why you started a freeze drying company.
Yeah, I'm Heath. This is Blaine. We've actually, this facility, we've only recently brought this online, but we've been working for the last couple of years together on this dream of going with a commercial freeze drying facility. It actually kind of started at my house. We kind of come out of the mushroom world, functional mushroom world. We're not psychonauts or anything like that, but we kind of worked together in the mushroom space for quite a while. I started off homesteading a little bit with my wife. She's a crazy gardener, and I was freeze drying a lot of things. And I thought, hey, how about we freeze dry some of these mushrooms, get it tested, see what the compounds are. Don't know if anybody's doing this. And so that's kind of how we started down this path. And so we just decided, we did a lot of market analysis, research on the commercial freeze drying industry, realized how massive it actually was. And
toured a lot of facilities, looked at other operations to see what other companies are doing.
Yeah. I mean, we've been down this road for a couple of years now.
Okay. So you have this company though, but how'd you even know about freeze drying? Tell me about that kind of origin. How'd you stumble into this?
I found out about freeze drying from my wife. She had, whenever you have a garden and stuff, and then basically it starts with a spouse that makes 20 times the amount of food, grows 20 times the amount of food than what you can actually eat as a household. Like, we can't give any more stuff away. I mean, it's just not enough people to give it to. And so we were looking at preserving food, and she's like, hey, I've been looking at these freeze dryers. And so we bought a home unit and freeze dried everything you could possibly think of, some with disastrous results. And I was like, man, this is an awesome way to preserve food. It's way better than what I'd ever dreamed. And so yeah, it really literally started out I set it up in my wife's laundry room and just started freeze drying stuff like 5 pounds at a time.
And then Blaine, where do you step into the freeze drying side of things?
Yeah, so my grandparents bought a freeze dryer in 2019, 2018. They got a harvest right. And that was the first one I'd ever seen. And then Heath calls me up and says, hey, come over here. Let's take a look at my new freeze dryer. So went over to his house. It wasn't something I'd really thought about in a long time. And we started playing around with freeze drying mushrooms. He showed me eggs, fruits, vegetables, candy. And we just started playing around with it at Heath's house.
Ribeyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the light bulb moment though, where you're like, freeze drying has a greater application to a big company that we're going to experience showing today?
Yeah, I think it really was born out of, like I said, we come out of the functional mushroom space, and there's always a problem with, we were really great at growing all these things, but then I saw the need of, the shelf life on this stuff is minuscule. I mean, days. And I said, man, the stuff that I'm freeze drying is turning out great, we need to figure out a way to scale this up. So I didn't know that there was such thing as like large scale freeze dryers. I had no idea. And so, yeah, how did we start down the journey of, I think we mostly online talking, and then we ended up going somewhere first, like an expo.
Yeah, we went to, I think it was the Process Expo. We started meeting with different companies that were freeze drying facilities, toll processing, doing their own products.
Yeah.
Came across TechSource, met with all the different freeze dryer manufacturers. Yeah, that's kind of where we first started digging in.
Yeah, that was our first big step to meet these companies was at the Process Expo. It was up in Chicago one year. That was a couple years ago. That's where I met Gene Ligman from Suntour.
Yeah, and I've done several interviews with Gene. Like, tell me about like getting introduced to him, because I didn't even know that there were freeze drying experts around.
We didn't either.
Yeah. So what like tell me about that interaction, and then how he's kind of helped kind of at least give you a better idea of what you're doing.
Well, we were researching the companies, and he said, you got to meet Gene. You got to meet Gene. He's the smartest guy I've talked to. He knows all this stuff. He's explained the systems to us. And so we met Gene at the Process Expo for the first time. And the amount of knowledge he kind of gave us was, he was the only person that had done that for us in the industry.
Well, yeah, Gene, he's a very unique guy as far as, it's not hard to find smart people. It's hard to find smart people that can hold a conversation with you and actually take the time to educate you. So he has that unique combination going, and we're willing to talk, we're willing to learn. And so he just kind of got us started on this journey, kind of told us where to look, how to look. Like I said, we've been doing our own research. We'd already studied the market. We knew we wanted to get into it. There was that barrier to entry. Is like, man, we got to find kind of our guru in the technology side of it, and so we found him.
And when you find, I know this from just finding different people too. My friend Levi, who's shooting behind the cameras of this interview, but when you find someone like, but there are certain points that you're like, you remember, and you're like, this just clicked for me. So, like, can you think of like a piece of advice that I guess like Gene introduced you to that you hadn't heard of before after talking to all these companies, that you're like, man, this made sense. This is why we need to continue doing commercial freeze drying and keep venturing into this?
Yeah, I think when we went into it, we went into it thinking that we were looking at a 4-rack system going into, we didn't really want any more than that. It's like, oh man, this is going to be crazy. But then I'm a numbers guy too, if the numbers make sense, I can run with it. And Gene was showing me all these different sizes, and I was sitting there looking at the investment and then what the return on investment would be. It's like, if we could come up with the space to actually facilitate a larger freeze dryer and run it into a tolling facility, we could have these things paid off in a reasonable, the bigger you go, the shorter amount of time it is to pay off your machines.
Yeah.
But it was like it's like jumping off a cliff. I mean, we don't have, cliffs are relative. I can jump off a 5-foot cliff and be relatively assured it's going to be all right. And so it just goes up in size. And so, yeah, we just chose the 100-foot cliff, hoping there's water at the bottom.
But you were right.
Yeah. So it was interesting when we got our eyes open to the world of, there's a vast difference between what we was used to in like harvest right machines to actual commercial freeze drying. It's just a night and day world out there in difference in technology.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, when you talk about looking at the numbers, and Blaine, maybe this is for you, is when you're looking at the numbers, a lot of people out there kind of don't even know where to start in terms of calculating how far they should really go in the freeze drying space. So are there certain things and factors that you can speak to that tell people this is the kind of calculations that we went through for even some product that you were wanting to sell that they should start looking at?
Yeah, so one of the first things we had to figure out is we knew that these machines consume a lot of power, but we'd never actually had anybody explain to us how much power they use per hour or per day. So Gene kind of broke that down for us. Once we understood that piece, we can look at, okay, what's the cost of the machine? How much time do we want to pay this back in? What is our overhead, our labor? And so once you have those kind of costs understood, you can look at how many pounds fit per tray of a product, how long does it take to run? So you can factor in your energy costs, your overhead, your labor, and come to somewhat of a formula to determine where you have to be at on price and what kind of margin you're looking for. So those are kind of pieces of the puzzle for understanding your pricing.
And so then also you decided to get into this toll freeze drying service side. I hadn't actually heard of this until I talked to TechSource Systems when I went down there to Ogden. But what is toll freeze drying?
Yeah, so basically you have the freeze dryers, you offer a service to other companies. So say you have some strawberries and you want to have these freeze dried. You send the strawberries to a company like Boreas. We freeze dry it for you. We can mill it into a powder, or we can package it into retail packages, and you're paying us for the service.
Or we can send it back in bulk.
Exactly. Yeah. So
However you
time
want.
on machine, additional value adds like milling, and then co-packing. So we're not owning the products. It's not our products we're processing. They send it to us. We do a service for them, and then send it back however they like.
Yeah, and so how would I go about, walk me through that service? Because like, do I have to go and source finding all these strawberries? And then does it have to be, I mean, you're in Mount Vernon, Missouri, you know, so there's obviously like shipping costs and things like that. Do you offer services to find sourcing those strawberries, or do I find those and then I have to work with someone to ship it here to this facility? What does that look like?
I feel like we're in that area. We can help. We can be a conduit. We got a lot of great contacts and resources that we can put them in contact with, or we can sit there and say, we don't have a problem putting them in contact directly with suppliers.
Sure.
Or if they want us to be the middleman, then we can, if time allows, we can actually help. We've helped a lot of companies source products as well.
We've got a lot more coming up in this video. I've got an actual tour of the facility that I'm standing right now at Boreas Freeze Drying in Mount Vernon, Missouri. You're going to see all the different phases that go on when they commercially freeze dry your potential product.